In 2019, the community of Birse in Aberdeenshire began a year-long project exploring the links between their community and chattel slavery in the Caribbean. The project was developed and managed by me on behalf of Birse Community Trust. I also engaged in the project as a member of the community, as a volunteer researcher, and as a parent of a child in the village school. This is a story of our project, of how we went about developing it, what we discovered, how we shared our learning, and where we go from here.
Birse Community Trust represents the people of the civil parish of Birse in Deeside. The parish is home to around 750 people, spread across 125 square kilometres. There are 3 main settlements and the largely uninhabited forest of Birse, which covers more than a quarter of the parish. The trust was formed in 1999 to manage on behalf of the community the extensive ancient rights of property owners on an area of ground known as the Commonty. The principal source of income for the trust is 2 large commercial forests acquired with support from the Scottish Land Fund. Alongside the natural heritage assets, the trust owns and manages 12 built heritage sites across the parish, including 3 Category A listed industrial buildings, a B listed kirk and the old school. It also maintains an archive of objects, documents and photographs, which is housed at the old school site. The It Was Aabody project evolved from research into the history of the local school, Fingen Primary. The school buildings were, in 2018, the subject of an options appraisal report. An assessment of the significance of the site led to a revisiting of research undertaken in the 1980s and early 90s by a local researcher, Robin Callender. Robin's research revealed that the school had been endowed by a former resident of the parish, the Reverend Gilbert Ramsay. Ramsay had moved to Antigua and from there to Barbados in the 1690s, where he remained until shortly before his death in 1728. Though Robin had published his research, revealing that Ramsay had made his fortune in the slave trade, in 2018 few people in the community knew about this. Robin had also published extracts of letters from Jamaica to Birse in the early 1800s from Francis Ramsay, no relation of Gilbert's. Francis was the son of a local farmer, but had benefited from a Gilbert Ramsay bursary at Marshall College, Aberdeen, which was the other major beneficiary of Gilbert Ramsay's will. The letters revealed that Francis bought a small property in Jamaica, which he called Birse, after his home in Scotland, and that he had children in Jamaica, the eldest of whom, aged 10 at the time, accompanied him on a trip to Scotland in 1824. What wasn't revealed in Francis' letters home, and came to light more recently, was that his children were born to a mixed heritage free woman, and that he owned enslaved people. Francis' 1836 slavery compensation claim is revealed in the research published by University College London in their Slavery Legacies database. The idea of developing a separate project, not on the future of the old school, but on the slavery links in the parish, was cemented at the Resourcing Scotland's Heritage Conference in Edinburgh in April 2018. Alan Bissett presented the keynote speech, in which he flagged a 2007 leaflet and pop-up exhibition by the Glasgow Building Preservation Trust and the Glasgow Anti-Racist Alliance, produced for Doors Open Day. It Wisney Us was later expanded into a publication written by Stephen Mullen and published by the Royal Incorporation of Architects in Scotland.
When Alan spoke about the links between Glasgow and slavery, the parallels with our small community came to mind. My response to It Wisney Us was, it was Aabody. If it was Birse, if it was Fingen Primary School, then it reached across all of.
We knew from what little research had been done already that our community's links spanned the full period of chattel slavery in the British Caribbean. And we knew that through the School and Poor Fund, the profits from slavery had reached the poorest in our community as well as the wealthiest. If we could research and better understand our community links with slavery and share that with other people, then our story would illustrate the reach of the slavery legacy right across Scottish society. We also knew that the legacy was still felt today, not just in the continuity of the school, but also in payments from the Poor Fund which were being made into the 1960s. There may be people alive in our community today who received funds which owed their origin to the sale of enslaved people in Barbados in 1728. As unlikely as it at first seems, our small community is a microcosm of Scotland's slavery story. Birse Community Trust identified the potential of the project and approached the primary school and the local secondary school. A heritage group of interested volunteers was formed under the auspices of the Trust to further support the development of the project. We established a relationship with the University of Aberdeen, which was formed by the merger of Marshall and King's colleges. The university was the other North East institution to benefit from Gilbert Ramsay's will. We worked with university staff in special collections. We sought the advice and input of students in the African Caribbean Society, and we engaged a PhD candidate as our academic mentor. And we rather tentatively reached out to Sir Geoff Palmer very early on in the project, aware of his advocacy work in the teaching of slavery history in Scottish schools. His reply was so encouraging, and it began a close working relationship between the Trust and Sir Geoff. It also introduced us to a partner school in Jamaica, Sir Geoff's own former primary school in Kingston, which was established at the time of abolition to educate formerly enslaved children. The development of the project came at a time when a handful of institutions, notably Glasgow University, were reviewing the origins of their funds, assessing the value of slavery-related funds received and looking at ways to atone. The value of the legacies from the Reverend Gilbert Ramsay to our school, the local Poor Fund, Marshall College and other individuals and institutions in the UK and the Caribbean was already quantified. The will was clear, though the fate of some funds remains in question. Of greater interest at the outset of the project was just how deep the legacy of slavery runs through our community over the centuries. It was important to us that our project centred on community-led research, that the community would be supported and enabled to research the slavery legacy and to share those stories with others. It was important that we engaged young people, both at the school founded by Ramsay's legacy and the local secondary school. When the project started, Fingon Primary had just 42 pupils across 3 classes, making it possible to run the project as a whole school topic. This presented challenges in developing age-appropriate materials for children as young as 4 years old, but we felt it was important that everyone had the opportunity to engage in the project. And it was important that we shared our learning in innovative and creative ways. One of the primary teachers suggested we develop a national resource for primary pupils. We had found few resources on chattel slavery aimed at primary-aged children, and none focusing on the Scottish experience. The discovery of a graphic novel by Magic Torch Comics, which told a difficult story in a sensitive way, convinced us that this format could engage young people with their heritage. We needed money. We applied to the National Lottery Heritage Fund and the local authority, and the project began early in 2019. We broke down our activities into 3 broad audiences: the primary pupils, the secondary pupils, and the wider community. The community research group would undertake most of the research to inform the school's activities. All 3 groups would contribute in different ways to the graphic novel and site interpretation, and to capture everyone's experiences and learning, we proposed creating a commemorative plaque. The establishment of a heritage or research group had 2 main objectives: to investigate the community's links with slavery and to develop the skills to enable the group to continue after the project. BCT maintains an archive on behalf of the community, but awareness of it has dropped in recent years. Through the I project, the community has learnt new skills which will enable members to take a more active role in managing access to the archive in future. A committed group of about a dozen people came forward at the start of the project. They ranged from people in their 20s through to their 80s and included a PhD candidate, farmers, professionals and retirees. We engaged a genealogist and researcher to develop training workshops. Although based in the Central Belt, Alec Wood has family links with our community and is a distant cousin to Francis Ramsey, who owned the Birse plantation in Jamaica in the early 19th century. Research was carried out online, in local libraries and archives, and in national archives in Edinburgh. The group met weekly. Communication outside the meetings was mainly electronic, with research and records shared on a common drive. We also contracted an interpretation writer and a designer to help the group create interpretive panels. Joe Anthony ran a workshop on writing for interpretation. Liz Clark worked with the group remotely on the designs. The result is a pair of panels to be installed on a community path that connects the school with the only shop in the parish, and 3 pop-up panels, all written and co-designed by people in our community. These pop-ups were to be displayed in local libraries and the university library during 2020, though COVID-19 has put this on hold. The findings of our research group fed directly into activities with the other key audiences of school pupils. Fingham Primary School occupies a 1960s building beside the earlier 18th century school building. Known previously as the Bankhead School or the Ramsey Endowed School, Fingham Primary School exists because of the 1728 legacy from Gilbert Ramsey endowing a free school to the parish. By the late 19th century, the endowment had dropped in value because of an interpretation of Ramsey's will which saw the legacies fixed at 1728 values. But the school was by then the largest and most central of the 5 schools in the parish. By the 1990s, it was the only school in the parish. The challenges of age-appropriate learning resources were overcome by developing project-specific material for the younger class. This included lesson plans and worksheets looking at past pupils, from Francis Ramsey, the slave owner and father of mixed heritage children in Jamaica, to people within the community that the children know today, looking at the history and development of the old school site, and exploring traditional and modern building materials and Caribbean culture. The middle class focused on the slave trade history, while the older class considered issues of human rights and equality today. Pupils enjoyed field trips. The 2 older classes travelled to the University of Aberdeen, where they were hosted by the curators in special collections and our academic mentor, Matthew Lee. The university holds material from key Northeast abolitionists, and the day offered pupils the chance to learn more about the campaigns for abolition and eventual emancipation. They saw one of the portraits of Ramsey owned by the university and the Powis Gates, which were built with slavery compensation money and are decorated with the carved profiles of former slaves. The younger class spent the day at the site of one of the other parish schools, the Forest of Birse School, about 9 miles from Fingham. The volunteer researchers had identified that Francis Ramsey's son Thomas attended this school when he visited from Jamaica in 1824. Having studied Jamaican culture, pupils were able to imagine how young Thomas might have felt, uprooted from Jamaica to live in the Forest of Birse. They played in the garden of the house where Thomas lived with his uncle, who was the teacher there. They measured trees, identifying 2 that were there in Thomas's day, and explored the site of the former school. Another whole school activity was a visit from Sir Geoff Palmer, who met each class to discuss their learning and answered their many questions. His visit had a huge impact on the pupils, with his stories and thoughts being quoted in discussions long after his visit. Sir Geoff also visited the local secondary school, Aabody Academy. The academy was more challenging to work with than the primary school, with less flexibility in lesson content and working across subjects. We worked with 2 year groups, one studying slavery history and the other diversity. As with the primary school audience, Sir Jeff's talk had an enormous impact on many of the academy pupils. He spoke not only on the history of chattel slavery, but also on how its legacy is felt today, something that chimed with the diversity fair that was held at the academy as part of the project. One of the more high-profile things to come from the project was the production of a graphic novel written and illustrated by Magic Torch Comics. Paul and Vary from Magic Torch delivered 2 days of workshops in the primary school, designing and writing comics and developing ideas for the book. Paul chose the character of Scotia to narrate the book, reflecting on past wrongs, and to interweave an Anansi tale which the children already knew. Vary's beautifully detailed illustrations captured emotions and details for which we had no factual evidence, but could be hinted at through images. Research findings are summarised at the end of the book, and the result is a publication we're very proud of. It was launched in Fingon by Sir Jeff Palmer at the start of Black History Month 2019, followed by an evening lecture which drew a wide audience. Copies of the book were sent to every local authority school and library throughout Aberdeenshire. In early 2020, it was made available free online. What did we learn about the history of our community and links with the Caribbean slave trade? While our links are in many ways stories repeated across the country, Gilbert Ramsay's story is remarkable for the level of wealth given to charitable causes. His legacies to the parish of Birse and Marshall College could have been worth anything from £2 million to a staggering £200 million in today's money. They were interest-bearing legacies, interpreted to mean that the legacies were capped at 1728 values, though the fate of the capital remains a mystery. A Bible given by Ramsay to the parish in his lifetime was found in the community archive and was identified as a rare vinegar Bible, so called because of a misprint in the parable of the vineyard. The book was printed in Oxford in 1717 and was a lavish production, affordable only by the very wealthy. Because of its rarity and value, it's now in the care of Aberdeen City and Shire archives, while environmental conditions in the old school are addressed through a conservation project. And on the evening of the book launch, when the Heritage Group gathered to reflect on their experience of the project, one member revealed research that raises more questions about the origins of Ramsay's wealth. Initially, it seemed his money was acquired through marriage, but there's a suggestion now of family, if not business links, with the director of the Royal Africa Company, the one company controlling the import of enslaved people into Barbados during Ramsay's lifetime. It was the Royal Africa Company which bought the infamous Bunce Island slaving port. We identified more than 180 recipients of Ramsay bursaries at Marshall College, later the University of Aberdeen. They illustrate the breadth of influence and power that bursary winners had across the British Empire, with firstly the Caribbean and then the East India Company being well represented. Many were from our community, and we were able to trace the path they took from Birse to prominent positions throughout the empire, aided by bursaries funded by slave trade profits. The final activity in our project is the unveiling of a plaque at the school, commemorating the enslaved men, women and children sold to fund the establishment of the school, acknowledging the links between our community and chattel slavery, and celebrating new friendships and understanding that have come out of the I project. The plaque is made up of individual clay tiles, each created by someone in our community in response to the project. Ceramicist Hilary Duncan led the activity and has arranged the tiles into 2 panels, one for Fingon and the other for our partner school in Jamaica. The unveiling has been delayed by COVID-19, but it is hoped it can happen in autumn 2020. While this is the final formal activity under the lottery-funded project, it doesn't mark the end of the subject for our community. Our pupils will continue to collaborate with the youth of West Kingston, Jamaica, through the links with North Street School, with the goal of creating opportunities for greater social mobility through education. Our school has raised funds for North Street's Needy Pupils Fund, and we look forward to closer communications between pupils and a sharing of cultures. And we hope that the opportunity might arise for our volunteer researchers to explore Ramsay's Royal Africa Company links through collaboration with the University of Aberdeen. The university will be undertaking a report into its own links with slavery, and has expressed interest in the I-Project model of community-led research and learning about local slave trade links in the city and shire. Across the region are truths waiting to be told. The legacy of slavery runs deep in our society, and it reaches to the present. If the collective response to Scotland's role in slavery has largely been, "It wasna us," then our community's history leads us to a response of, "Aye, it was Aabody."